The rain had stopped falling just an hour before, leaving the streets of Beverly Hills clean and shining under the bright streetlights. It was a Friday night in late October, and the expensive cars moved slowly through the busy roads. People, dressed in fancy clothes, walked on the sidewalks, going to different restaurants and clubs in the area. At the corner of Rodeo Drive, there stood a restaurant called the Golden Prime. It was one of the most expensive places to eat in all of Beverly Hills. The building looked impressive with its tall glass windows and golden lights that made everything inside look warm and inviting. Through the windows, people could see well-dressed men and women sitting at tables covered with white cloth, eating expensive food and drinking costly wine. The restaurant was always busy on Friday nights. Rich people, famous actors, and important business people came here to eat and be seen. The prices were very high, but that did not stop people from coming. In fact, many people came here just because it was expensive. They wanted others to know they could afford to eat at such a place. Inside the restaurant, the sounds of conversation and laughter filled the air. Waiters in black suits moved quickly between tables, carrying plates of food and bottles of wine. The kitchen was busy with chefs cooking and preparing meals. Everything looked perfect and organized. At the front of the restaurant, near the big glass doors, stood a young woman named Katie. She was 24 years old and had been working as a hostess for about 6 months. Katie had long brown hair and wore a black dress that the restaurant required all hostesses to wear. She stood behind a tall wooden stand that held the reservation book for the evening. Katie was not having a good night. She had been working since 3 in the afternoon, and her feet hurt from standing in high heels for so long. Earlier that day, her boyfriend had broken up with her over the phone, and she was still upset about it. She kept looking at her phone, hoping he might call to say sorry, but no call came. Behind Katie, the restaurant manager was having his own problems. His name was Steve Martinez, and he was 38 years old. Steve had worked at expensive restaurants for 15 years, and he thought he knew everything about running such a place. He was a short man with black hair that was starting to turn gray. He wore an expensive black suit and always kept his shoes very clean and shiny. Steve was worried because a famous food critic was supposed to come to the restaurant sometime that week. The critic worked for a popular food magazine, and a good review could bring many new customers to the restaurant. A bad review could hurt the business badly. Steve had been telling all the workers to be extra careful and to make sure everything was perfect. The restaurant was almost full that night. At one table sat a rich couple from New York who were visiting Beverly Hills for their anniversary. At another table, a group of business people were celebrating after signing a big contract. Near the window, a famous singer was having dinner, with her manager talking quietly about her next album. The servers moved between tables taking orders and bringing food. The sommelier, a wine expert named Carlos, was helping customers choose expensive wines to go with their meals. In the kitchen, the head chef was shouting orders to the other cooks, making sure every dish was prepared perfectly. Outside the restaurant, the night was getting cooler. The streetlights made long shadows on the sidewalk, and the sound of car engines mixed with the distant noise of music coming from other restaurants and bars in the area. It was at this moment, at exactly 8:30 in the evening, that an old car pulled up slowly to the front of the restaurant. The car was not fancy like the other cars parked nearby. It was a simple blue sedan, maybe 10 years old, with some small scratches on the side. The car stopped near the front door, and the engine turned off. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the driver's door opened slowly and an old man got out. He moved carefully like someone who was not as strong as he used to be. He was tall, but his shoulders were bent forward a little, and he walked with a wooden cane in his right hand. The old man was wearing simple clothes. He had on gray pants and a dark blue sweater that looked like it had been washed many times. His shoes were old but clean, and he wore a simple watch on his wrist. His hair was white and thin, and his face had many lines from age and from spending time in the sun. He stood beside his car for a moment, looking up at the restaurant. The bright lights from inside made him squint his eyes a little. He seemed to be thinking about something, maybe wondering if he should go inside or just drive away. After a few seconds, he made his decision. He locked his car with an old key and walked slowly toward the front door of the restaurant. His cane made a soft tapping sound on the sidewalk with each step he took. Inside the restaurant, Katie was still standing behind her hostess stand, looking through the reservation book for the third time that evening. She was trying to see if there were any empty tables for people who might come without reservations. The restaurant policy was to always try to find space for customers, especially if they looked like they had money to spend. Steve Martinez was near the bar, talking to the bartender about making sure they had enough expensive whiskey for the weekend. He was also watching the front door, hoping to see the food critic arrive. He had no idea what the critic looked like, which made him nervous every time someone new walked in. The other customers in the restaurant were busy with their own conversations and meals. Nobody was paying attention to the front door or to the old man who was now walking slowly up the 3 steps that led to the entrance. The old man reached the door and paused for just a moment. Through the glass, he could see the busy restaurant inside, with all the well-dressed people and expensive decorations. He took a deep breath, reached out with his left hand and pulled the heavy glass door open. As he stepped inside, the warm air from the restaurant hit his face, along with the smells of cooked food and the sounds of people talking and laughing. He stood just inside the door for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the bright lights inside. Katie looked up from her reservation book and saw the old man standing near the door. She noticed his simple clothes and his cane, and she immediately made a judgment about him. In her mind, he did not look like the kind of person who usually came to eat at the Golden Prime. The old man stood quietly inside the restaurant door, waiting for someone to help him. He did not seem to be in a hurry. His eyes moved slowly around the room, taking in all the fancy decorations and expensive furniture. He had seen many places like this in his long life, but he still found it interesting to watch how people acted when they thought they were in an important place. Katie finally noticed him standing there. She had been busy writing notes in the reservation book and had not seen him come in right away. When she looked up and saw the old man with his simple clothes and wooden cane, she felt a little annoyed. She was already having a bad day, and now she had to deal with someone who probably could not afford to eat here. She did not smile when she looked at him. Instead, she made a face that showed she was not happy about being interrupted. She put her pen down on the reservation book with a small bang that made a sharp sound. "Can I help you?" Katie asked in a voice that did not sound helpful at all. She did not even look directly at the old man when she spoke. Instead, she kept her eyes on the reservation book as if she had more important things to do. The old man walked slowly toward the hostess stand. His cane made soft tapping sounds on the marble floor. Each step seemed to take effort, and he moved carefully, like someone who did not want to fall down. "Good evening," he said in a voice that was deep and rough, like someone who had been smoking cigarettes for many years. "I was hoping you might have a table available for dinner." His voice was quiet, and Katie had to listen carefully to hear what he said. She looked up at him again, this time studying his appearance more closely. She saw his old sweater, his worn pants, and his simple shoes. She noticed that his hands looked rough and weathered, like someone who had worked hard for many years. Katie sighed loudly, making sure the old man could hear her disappointment. She flipped through several pages of the reservation book, even though she already knew what she was going to tell him. "Sir, this is a very exclusive restaurant," she said, speaking slowly like she was talking to a child. "We have reservations, booked for months in advance. Our customers usually make their reservations weeks ahead of time." The old man nodded politely. "I understand. I was just hoping you might have something available. I don't need anything special, just a quiet table where I can have a good meal." Katie looked at him again and shook her head. She was thinking about all the rich and famous people who came to eat at the restaurant. She was thinking about the expensive cars parked outside and the fancy clothes that most customers wore. This old man did not fit with the image she had of the restaurant's customers. "I'm sorry, but we're completely booked for tonight," she said, though she had not even checked to see if there were any empty tables. "You might want to try the coffee shop down the street. They don't take reservations and the prices are much more reasonable." While Katie was talking to the old man, other people in the restaurant started to notice what was happening. At a table near the front, a young couple named Danny and Lisa were having their first anniversary dinner. They had saved money for months to be able to afford eating at such an expensive place. Danny whispered to Lisa, "Look at that old guy. I wonder what he's doing here." Lisa looked toward the hostess stand and saw the old man talking to Katie. "He doesn't look like he belongs here," she whispered back. "His clothes look so old and simple." At another table, a businessman named Robert was eating dinner with his wife. Robert had noticed the old man as soon as he walked in. Something about the man seemed familiar, but Robert could not remember where he might have seen him before. "That man looks like someone I know," Robert said to his wife quietly. His wife looked over at the hostess stand. "Really? He just looks like any old man to me. Probably someone who got lost and wandered in here by mistake." Meanwhile, Steve Martinez was still talking to the bartender about the wine selection for the weekend. He had not noticed the old man come in because he was facing away from the front door. The bartender, whose name was Mike, could see what was happening at the hostess stand over Steve's shoulder. "Hey, Steve," Mike said quietly. "Looks like Katie is dealing with someone up front." Steve turned around to look toward the hostess stand. He saw Katie talking to an old man who was leaning on a cane. From where Steve was standing, he could not hear what they were saying, but he could tell from Katie's body language that she was not being very friendly. Steve excused himself from his conversation with Mike and walked toward the front of the restaurant. As he got closer, he could hear the end of Katie's conversation with the old man. "Like I said, sir, you might be more comfortable at a different type of restaurant," Katie was saying. Her voice had gotten a little louder, and some of the nearby customers were starting to listen to what she was saying. Steve reached the hostess stand just as Katie finished speaking. He looked at the old man and immediately made the same judgment that Katie had made. He saw the simple clothes, the old cane, and the weathered appearance, and he decided that this person did not belong in his restaurant. "Is there a problem here?" Steve asked Katie, but he was looking at the old man when he spoke. His voice was polite but not warm or welcoming. "This gentleman is looking for a table," Katie explained, "but I've told him we're completely booked for the evening." Steve nodded and turned to face the old man directly. He put on a fake smile that did not reach his eyes. It was the kind of smile that people use when they want to appear polite but are actually being rude. "I'm sorry, sir," Steve said, "but as you can see, this is a very upscale establishment. We cater to a very specific type of clientele." He paused and looked at the old man's clothes again. "Perhaps you would be more comfortable at a restaurant that better suits your budget." The old man's face did not change expression, but something shifted in his eyes. For just a moment there was a flash of something that might have been anger or disappointment, but it passed quickly, and his face returned to its calm, patient look. "I see," the old man said quietly. "Thank you for your time." He started to turn away from the hostess stand, preparing to leave the restaurant. His cane tapped softly on the marble floor as he began to walk back toward the front door. As he walked away, several customers watched him go. Some of them felt uncomfortable about what they had just witnessed, but none of them said anything. The restaurant returned to its normal sounds of conversation and clinking dishes, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. The old man walked slowly toward the front door of the restaurant. Each step he took seemed heavy, and his wooden cane made soft sounds on the marble floor. The bright lights of the restaurant made long shadows behind him as he moved away from the hostess stand. Katie watched him go and felt a small sense of relief. She did not like dealing with people who she thought did not belong in the restaurant. She picked up her pen and went back to looking at the reservation book, trying to forget about what had just happened. Steve Martinez also watched the old man walking toward the door. He felt satisfied that he had handled the situation well. In his mind, he had protected the restaurant's reputation by making sure only the right kind of people were allowed to eat there. He straightened his tie and began to walk back toward the bar. The other customers in the restaurant had mixed feelings about what they had seen. Some of them felt uncomfortable watching an old man being turned away, but they did not want to get involved. Others agreed with what Katie and Steve had done, thinking that expensive restaurants should only serve people who could afford them and who dressed appropriately. Danny and Lisa, The young couple, celebrating their anniversary, whispered to each other about what they had witnessed. "I feel bad for that old man," Lisa said quietly. "He seemed so polite and nice." Danny nodded. "Yeah, but I guess this place has rules about who can eat here. Maybe he really couldn't afford it." At another table, Robert was still trying to remember where he might have seen the old man before. Something about his face seemed very familiar, but Robert could not place it. The old man was now only a few steps away from the front door. He moved slowly but with dignity, not showing any anger or embarrassment about being turned away. He had lived long enough to know that some people judged others by their appearance, and he was not surprised by what had happened. Just as he reached for the handle of the front door, something unexpected happened. The door suddenly swung open from the outside, and a group of people walked in quickly. The first person through the door was a man with blonde hair who moved with great confidence. He was wearing a clean white chef's jacket that looked expensive and professional. His hair was perfectly styled, and he had bright blue eyes that seemed to notice everything around him. Behind him came a young woman with dark hair carrying a notebook and a phone. Following them were three men with cameras and recording equipment. The man in the chef's jacket was Gordon Ramsay, one of the most famous chefs in the world. He was known for his cooking shows on television and for his restaurants around the globe. He had come to the Golden Prime to film a segment for his television show about the best restaurants in Beverly Hills. Gordon walked into the restaurant like he owned the place. He was used to being the center of attention wherever he went. His assistant, Nicole, followed close behind him, talking quietly into her phone to someone about their schedule for the evening. Right then, Gordon said in his strong British accent, his voice carrying across the restaurant, "Let's see what this place is all about." The camera crew spread out behind Gordon, setting up their equipment to film his visit. One cameraman focused on Gordon while another looked around the restaurant to capture the fancy decorations and well-dressed customers. The old man had stepped aside when the door opened, moving out of the way so Gordon and his team could enter. He stood quietly against the wall near the entrance, watching as the restaurant suddenly became very busy and excited. Steve Martinez had been walking back toward the bar when he heard Gordon's voice. He stopped immediately and turned around to see what was happening. When he saw Gordon Ramsay standing in his restaurant, his face changed completely. Steve's eyes went wide with surprise and excitement. His mouth opened a little, and he forgot all about the old man he had just turned away. This was the most famous person who had ever come to eat at the Golden Prime, and Steve knew that having Gordon Ramsay review the restaurant could make it one of the most popular places in all of Beverly Hills. Steve almost ran toward the front of the restaurant, moving so fast that he nearly knocked over a waiter carrying a tray of drinks. The waiter had to jump out of the way to avoid dropping the glasses. "Chef Ramsay," Steve called out loudly, his voice filled with excitement. "What an incredible honor. Welcome to our restaurant." Steve reached Gordon and stuck out his hand to shake hands with the famous chef. His whole body was shaking a little, because he was so nervous and excited at the same time. Gordon shook Steve's hand but kept looking around the restaurant. His sharp eyes noticed everything: the fancy decorations, the expensive furniture, the well-dressed customers, and the staff who were all staring at him with amazement. Katie had looked up from her reservation book when she heard the commotion at the front door. When she saw Gordon Ramsay, she could not believe her eyes. She had watched his cooking shows on television many times, and now he was standing right in front of her. She quickly tried to fix her hair and smooth down her dress. She wanted to look perfect in case Gordon noticed her, or if she appeared on his television show. She completely forgot about the old man who had been asking for a table just a few minutes earlier. All around the restaurant, customers were turning in their chairs to see what was happening. Some of them recognized Gordon immediately and started whispering excitedly to their dinner companions. Others took out their phones to take pictures, hoping to capture a moment with the famous chef. The camera crew continued to film everything that was happening. They were experienced at working with Gordon and knew how to stay out of his way, while still getting good footage for the television show. Nicole, Gordon's assistant, was writing notes in her notebook about the restaurant's appearance and the reaction of the staff. She would use these notes later to help plan what would be included in the television segment. Gordon was still shaking hands with Steve when something caught his attention. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed the old man standing quietly against the wall near the entrance. The old man was not trying to get Gordon's attention like everyone else in the restaurant. Instead, he was just watching everything with calm, patient eyes. There was something about the old man that made Gordon look at him more carefully. Gordon had met many famous people in his career, and he had developed a good sense for recognizing when someone was important, even if they were not dressed in expensive clothes. Gordon's expression began to change as he studied the old man's face more closely. His eyes narrowed a little as he tried to remember where he might have seen that face before. The old man's features seemed very familiar, but Gordon could not immediately place him. Meanwhile, Steve was still talking excitedly about how honored the restaurant was to have Gordon visit. He was explaining all the special dishes they served, and talking about the expensive wines they had available. But Gordon was no longer listening to Steve. His attention was completely focused on the old man by the wall. Gordon Ramsay stopped listening to Steve Martinez completely. His full attention was now on the old man standing quietly by the wall. Something about the man's face was very familiar, but Gordon could not quite remember where he had seen him before. The old man noticed that Gordon was looking at him, but he did not try to get the famous chef's attention. He just stood there calmly, waiting to see what would happen next. His weathered hands rested on top of his wooden cane, and his eyes met Gordon's with a steady, patient look. Steve Martinez was still talking excitedly about the restaurant, but he realized that Gordon was not paying attention to him anymore. Steve followed Gordon's gaze and saw that the chef was staring at the old man by the wall. "Oh, him," Steve said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Don't worry about him, chef. Ramsay, he's nobody important. We were just explaining to him that this restaurant is not suitable for someone like him." When Steve said these words, something clicked in Gordon's mind. He looked more carefully at the old man's face, studying the strong jawline, the piercing eyes, and the way he carried himself with quiet dignity despite his age. Suddenly, Gordon's eyes went very wide. His mouth opened in surprise, and he took a step back. He could not believe what he was seeing. "Wait a minute," Gordon said quietly, his voice filled with shock. "Wait just one bloody minute." The camera crew noticed that something was happening, and quickly turned their cameras toward Gordon to capture his reaction. Nicole looked up from her notebook, wondering why Gordon had suddenly stopped talking to the restaurant manager. Gordon walked slowly toward the old man, leaving Steve standing, alone by the hostess stand. With each step, Gordon became more certain about what he was seeing. His heart started beating faster as he realized he was looking at one of his childhood heroes. "Excuse me, sir," Gordon said when he reached the old man. His voice was much softer, now filled with respect and amazement. Are you Clint Eastwood?" The old man smiled slightly, the first real smile he had shown since entering the restaurant. "Yes, I am," he said in his famous, deep, gravelly voice. Gordon's face broke into a huge grin. He could not believe he was standing face to face with one of the greatest actors and directors in movie history. "Bloody hell," he said loudly, his excitement clear in his voice. "I can't believe it. You're Clint Eastwood." The reaction in the restaurant was immediate and dramatic. Every conversation stopped at once. Customers who had been eating and talking suddenly went completely silent. Waiters stopped in the middle of serving food. Even the sounds from the kitchen seemed to get quieter. Katie dropped her pen again, and this time it fell to the floor with a loud clatter. Her face turned bright red as she realized she had just been rude to one of the most famous actors in the world. Her hands started shaking, and she felt like she might be sick. Steve Martinez felt like the floor was falling out from under him. His face went completely white and he started sweating. He realized that he had just insulted and turned away one of the biggest movie stars who had ever lived. His mind raced as he thought about how badly this could hurt the restaurant's reputation. All around the restaurant, customers started whispering excitedly to each other. Many of them took out their phones to take pictures, though they tried to be discreet about it. Some people stood up from their tables to get a better look at the famous actor. Danny and Lisa, the young couple at their anniversary dinner, looked at each other with wide eyes. "Oh my God," Lisa whispered. That's really Clint Eastwood. We just watched them be rude to Clint Eastwood. Danny shook his head in disbelief. I can't believe they tried to kick him out. He's made some of the best movies ever. Robert, the businessman who had thought the old man looked familiar, slapped his forehead with his hand. Of course, he said to his wife. That's why he looked familiar. That's the man from all those Western movies and Dirty Harry films. Gordon extended his hand to Clint, and the famous actor shook it warmly. Mr. Eastwood, Gordon said, his voice full of admiration. This is such an honor. I'm Gordon Ramsay. I've been watching your movies since I was a kid. Clint smiled and nodded. I know who you are, Chef Ramsay. I watch your shows. You're very good at what you do. The camera crew was filming everything now, capturing this unexpected meeting between two famous men. Nicole was writing quickly in her notebook, knowing that this moment would make great television. Gordon turned around to face Steve Martinez, and his expression changed completely. The excitement and joy disappeared from his face, replaced by anger and disappointment. His eyes became hard and cold as he looked at the restaurant manager. Let me understand this correctly, Gordon said, his voice getting louder with each word. You just turned away Clint Eastwood. You told one of the greatest actors and directors in movie history that he wasn't good enough for your restaurant? Steve tried to speak, but no words came out. He opened and closed his mouth like a fish. But he could not think of anything to say that would make the situation better. Gordon's voice got even louder. This man has made movies that millions of people around the world love. He's won Academy Awards, he's a legend. And you judged him by his clothes? Other customers were now openly staring at the scene unfolding near the front of the restaurant. Some of them looked embarrassed, realizing they had also judged the old man based on his simple appearance. Katie was still standing behind the hostess stand, wishing she could disappear. She kept thinking about how rude she had been and how she had told Clint Eastwood to go eat at a coffee shop instead. Gordon turned back to Clint, his anger disappearing as quickly as it had come. Mr. Eastwood, I am so sorry about how you've been treated here. This is absolutely disgraceful. Clint waved his hand dismissively. Don't worry about it, Chef. I've seen this kind of thing before. Some people judge others by what they see on the outside. But Gordon was not willing to let it go so easily. He was known for standing up for what was right, and he was not going to let this incident pass without doing something about it. No, sir, Gordon said firmly. This is not acceptable. You deserve better than this. He turned to look around the restaurant, making sure his voice carried to every corner of the room. Everyone here should be ashamed of themselves for allowing this to happen. The entire restaurant remained silent, with everyone watching to see what Gordon would do next. The tension in the air was thick, and everyone could sense that something important was about to happen. Gordon Ramsay looked around the silent restaurant with fire in his eyes. Every person in the room could feel his anger, and nobody dared to make a sound. The famous chef was known for his temper, but this was different. This was not just anger, about bad food or poor service. This was about respect and human dignity. This is exactly what's wrong with places like this, Gordon said loudly, his voice carrying to every corner of the restaurant. You people judge others by their clothes, by their age, by how much money you think they have. You've just embarrassed yourselves in front of a living legend. Steve Martinez tried to step forward to say something, but Gordon held up his hand to stop him. Don't you dare try to make excuses, Gordon said sharply. What you did was wrong, and everyone here knows it. Gordon turned back to Clint Eastwood with a completely different expression. His anger melted away and was replaced by genuine warmth and respect. Mr. Eastwood, he said softly, would you do me the great honor of being my guest for dinner tonight? I would love to cook for you personally. Clint looked at Gordon with appreciation. He could see that the young chef truly meant what he was saying. That's very kind of you, Chef Ramsay, Clint replied. I would be honored to accept your invitation. Katie tried to speak up from behind the hostess stand. But Chef Ramsay, she said in a shaky voice, we really are fully booked tonight. All our tables are reserved. Gordon turned to look at Katie, with such intensity that she immediately stepped back. Then you'll find a table, he said in a voice that left no room for argument. "You'll find the best table in this restaurant, and you'll make sure it's perfect." He then looked at Steve Martinez. "And you, Steve, will personally make sure that Mr. Eastwood receives the finest service this place can provide. You'll treat him like the honored guest he should have been from the moment he walked in here." Steve nodded quickly, sweat running down his face. "Yes, Chef Ramsay, of course, right away." He turned to the restaurant staff and started giving orders. "Clear table 12 immediately. Make sure it has fresh flowers and our best tablecloth, and somebody get Carlos to select our finest wine." The restaurant suddenly came alive with activity. Waiters rushed to prepare the best table in the house, which was located by a large window with a beautiful view of the city lights. The table had been reserved for a wealthy couple who were supposed to arrive in an hour, but Steve decided to move them to a different table. Carlos, the wine expert, hurried to the wine cellar to choose a special bottle for Clint. He selected a vintage wine that was worth more than most people made in a month. Tony, one of the busboys, polished the silverware until it shined like mirrors. Gordon personally escorted Clint to the table by the window. He pulled out the chair for the famous actor and made sure he was comfortable. "Mr. Eastwood," Gordon said, "I'm going to prepare something special for you tonight. Something that's not even on the menu." Clint smiled. "I trust your judgment completely, Chef." As Gordon walked toward the kitchen to begin cooking, the other customers in the restaurant slowly started talking again. But their conversations were now all about what they had just witnessed. Many of them felt ashamed about how they had judged. The old man, when he first walked in, Danny and Lisa, the young couple, were talking quietly at their table. "I feel terrible," Lisa said. "We should have said something when they were being rude to him." Danny nodded. "You're right. It doesn't matter what someone is wearing. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect." At another table, Robert was explaining to his wife who Clint Eastwood was and why he was so famous. "He's made some of the greatest movies of all time," Robert said. "Movies like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and Unforgiven. He's won Academy Awards for directing. He's a true legend." Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Gordon was working with incredible focus and energy. He had decided to prepare a special steak dinner for Clint, using the finest ingredients the restaurant had. He seasoned the meat perfectly and cooked it exactly the way he thought it should be done. While Gordon cooked, his camera crew filmed everything. They knew this would make an amazing segment for his television show. Nicole was already thinking about how they would edit the footage to tell the story of what had happened. Back in the dining room, Steve Martinez was running around, making sure everything was perfect for Clint's table. He was terrified that Gordon might give the restaurant a bad review on television, which could ruin the business. He kept checking on Clint every few minutes, asking if there was anything he needed. Katie had left the hostess stand and was hiding in the back office, too embarrassed to face anyone. She kept thinking about how she had treated one of the most famous actors in the world. She worried that she might lose her job because of what had happened. After about 30 minutes, Gordon emerged from the kitchen carrying a plate that looked like a work of art. The steak was cooked perfectly, surrounded by beautiful vegetables and a rich sauce. He set the plate in front of Clint with obvious pride. "Mr. Eastwood," Gordon said, "this is my special preparation of aged beef with seasonal vegetables and a red wine reduction. I hope you enjoy it." Clint took a bite and his face lit up with pleasure. "Chef Ramsay," he said, "this is absolutely delicious, one of the best steaks I've ever had." Gordon beamed with pride and sat down across from Clint. The two men began talking, and despite their different backgrounds, they found they had a lot in common. They both appreciated hard work, quality craftsmanship, and treating people with respect. As they talked, other customers in the restaurant watched with fascination. They were witnessing a genuine friendship forming between two very different but equally talented men. The evening continued with Gordon and Clint sharing stories about their careers and their lives. Gordon told Clint about growing up in Scotland and learning to cook. Clint shared stories about making movies and directing films. When the meal was finished, Clint stood up slowly and shook Gordon's hand. "Thank you, Chef," he said, "not just for the wonderful meal, but for showing everyone here what real class and respect look like." Gordon smiled. "The pleasure was all mine, Mr. Eastwood. You've reminded me why I got into this business in the first place, to bring people together and create special moments. As Clint prepared to leave, many of the other customers stood up to show their respect. Some of them came over to apologize for not speaking up earlier when he was being treated badly. Steve Martinez walked Clint to the front door, apologizing repeatedly for what had happened. Clint was gracious and forgiving, but Steve knew he had learned an important lesson that night. As Clint walked slowly out to his old car, the entire restaurant watched through the windows. They had all witnessed something special that night. A lesson about not judging people by their appearance and about the importance of treating everyone with dignity and respect. The story of what happened that night would be told many times in the years that followed, becoming a legend in Hollywood about the night Clint Eastwood was almost turned away from a fancy restaurant, and how Gordon Ramsay showed everyone what true character really means.